All right, guys, welcome back to the Buck Fever podcast. You got me and Jake tonight, and it's kind of getting to be about that time of year again where things are starting to heat up in the woods. We hit that mid October into late October here over the next couple weekends. So, tonight we kind of want to talk about some of the signs that you start to see when the rut starts heating up a little bit. What's something to focus in on that's a positive sign that means big bucks are in the area, and what are some signs that bucks have passed through but maybe don't indicate very much for hunting. So we kind of want to go through all of that tonight, and should be a pretty short episode but a little bit more informative. We've had like three back to back to back story episodes of successful hunts, which is obviously fantastic. But I know a lot of you guys enjoy when we're a little bit more informational and kind of talking about what's going on. So we thought we'd get one of these in there before hopefully some more success to come. So, although I do know, buddy, you had a little bit of success this past weekend, eh?
Yeah, my dad and I snuck out and got out there on Friday. Little context for everyone listening in Wisconsin, it rained about 2 inches on Friday, from Thursday night into Friday, at least where we were, and then where we hunt. I mean, just pissed the whole day long. And I kept telling everybody at work, like, I'm leaving at 3, I'm going hunting. Like, you're crazy. I'm like, hey, I'm going hunting. Can't kill him from the couch. And so I got out at 3. I was home. I was working close to home, so I just took my own truck there and got home at like 3:10. Showered. Everything was pretty much loaded. Terry and I hopped in the truck and we were bumming out there, and it was pretty heavy rain the whole way up there. And like right when we got to about 10 minutes out from where we were, and it started to mist. And I was like, okay. So we get to the farm and we to get to our carport, which we store our four-wheelers and golf cart in. And so we just changed in there. We were nice and dry. We hopped on the golf cart, drove it down to the stand, parked it in the field. There's deer out in the field already when we were driving out there, and they kind of just bounded back in. So we get to our enclosed 4x8 stand, and I mean, a little wet from the ride, but really quite dry compared to what it would have been if we had to walk. So we get in there and we're kind of messing around. I'm trying to kill all these bees that are like half asleep, half dead. And he's like, it was like 10, 15 minutes. He's like, deer's right in front of us, like 40 yards away. So we're kind of getting ready and I'm watching because he was going to shoot. So I was filming. And the doe comes out at like 35 yards, and which is a little far for dad. And he's like, we'll just wait. I'm like, it's early. It's only like 5:20. We got an hour and a half left. Well, about an hour and 10 minutes. And so then her nubby comes out later. I don't know if it was her nubby. I'm not convinced, but he was almost as big as her, like if not bigger. His nubs were like coming through his head. They weren't spikes. They were just rounded off little nubs. Like it looked like he had quarter-sized acorns on his head. It was the coolest thing ever. So they kind of were out in front of us and milled around for a while. And all of a sudden, she starts coming back and making her way to us. And so Dad's ready, and then we switch window. We switch left to right because it looked like she was going to go the other way and he had a better shot where I was standing. And so we're going, and all of a sudden, she goes back the other way, like kind of quick. So he's like, here, you just shoot her. And I give him the camera, and he gives me my bow, and sure enough, and she 16 yards broadside, ran about 60, 70 yards and piled up, and we didn't wait long because it was raining, starting to rain again, and good thing we didn't because that blood was hard to find. I mean, I didn't really look too hard. I just went to where I last saw her, and she was only like 20 yards from there, but I'm like, you shoot a deer, and you don't know how well it's hit, or like in my case, we watched footage, and I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure she's crushed. I mean, you almost can't wait that long in the rain, which is a little lesson to be had. Like, obviously you want to make a great shot at all times, but if it's raining, don't take those questionable shots where you don't know if you're gonna kill
Right.
immediately. So that was kind of a lot, like, because I never shot one in the rain, but that blood was like, she was bleeding good. I shoot the rage, it rips her open, but like it hit the ground and just kind of like dissolved into the rain that was already there, and the grass was soaked. So, but we got in, got out. We were back to the truck, got in there before it was even closed, and that was the goal. We didn't really want to spook anything or go trouncing around because we got a few running around that are decent. So
Well, that's not a
worked out
bad
good.
night. Yeah.
No, it worked out good. We were back to the cabin at 7:30. Went and did a little shopping and good to go. Had some cocktails the rest of the night, and it was a good night.
Nice. Well, in terms of the time of year now and getting into the pre-rut here, what are some of those things that you're looking for that are going to start popping up? Some of those signs that kind of let you know that things are starting to get hot.
Well, right now the most prominent is your scrapes. I mean, I've got we got some buddies. My uncle, one of them, and across the road, he's got buddies that hunt, and I mean, we all share our intel. And my uncle doesn't have any scrapes across the road. He said they're blowing up everywhere. They watched them make scrapes this weekend, and our property, nothing. But fast forward, rewind 2 weeks ago, our property was just littered with scrapes, which is very unusual. I'm not sure why they were doing it, to be honest, if they were what the deal was, but your first sign's probably going to be scrapes, and then they're not going to start running before they start making scrapes. And once that does happen, it gets into that when they start chasing. You're probably going to see your littler ones running around first, your little bucks chasing because they don't really know what's going on. But like I think on camera this morning we had a little guy running through our food plot, not running to run, but running to chase type thing. So it's close. I mean, it's definitely getting close, and with this weather, getting down into the 30s and 40s at night should get them going. To be honest, I mean, but mostly your scrapes is what I would say, which we haven't had. I don't know why they disappeared. It is a little early for us though, and usually we're looking at end of October, 10 days before Halloween, which is 4 days away. So I'm hoping this weekend they'll start ramping up, and then by that Halloween weekend we'll be pretty close to full force.
Right. I would agree. Scrapes are pretty much the number one thing to look at. But I feel like everybody says that, and then they'll turn around and say, well, you can't really hunt over scrapes because you don't know that they're going to come back. It doesn't really mean that they're going to come back to that, so it's not necessarily what you should hunt over. And yet, we set up mock scrapes specifically at our stand sites that we'll hunt over pretty religiously. So I'm curious what your take is on that, because obviously there's two trains of thought there.
I would totally disagree with that. I've never, I'm not bragging at any means by this, but I've shot 4 out of the 5 bucks with my bow have been opening weekend or the second weekend. So it's not like I've had a ton of opportunity to really bow hunt during the rut where I get to do my own things. I'm kind of tagging along now, but I really do agree that I think you should, just because you don't know if the same buck's going to hit it, whoop-de-doo. If it's the rut, anything can happen. Those bucks are going to be traveling through, and I don't think that they'll only hit it once. I think if you put a scrape out there, they'll come back because they're going to check it. They're going to see who else is running around on their land. If you got a big boy that's running the farm, he's gonna hit everyone. He doesn't want any other buddy around there competition. So, I don't think it's a horrible. I wouldn't put all your time and money into it. Like I wouldn't set up there every single night on the same stand. I would give it some, get into some bedding areas or some timber where they're going to run. But I do agree that sitting over a scrape is not a bad thing, especially if they're hot. Like if you got cameras out that are on scrapes and they're hitting them, I would for sure sit over one.
Yeah, and like you said, with some of those neighbors and whatever, where there's scrapes all over the place in one spot, and then next door there's nothing really happening. If I was going out to a public spot and I had this 10-acre chunk of woods that was just littered with scrapes, and then I heard somebody on the internet say, well, they don't come back, so you shouldn't hunt there. And then I walked across the street to the next 10 acres where there's not a single scrape. I can't imagine why in the world I would ever sit in the place that doesn't have any sign of buck activity over a place that is littered with buck activity. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I would totally hunt the scrapes. Now, like you said, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to, the same big buck is going to come back to the same scrape. But if it's an area where there are a lot of scrapes, that's just a sign of a lot of buck activity in the area. So to set up on a tree that's going to give you the right opportunity with the right wind, over maybe a hot trail where you think there's a line of scrapes and there's a good chance they might come through, like that to me is about as prime as it gets.
Right, and that's the other thing. I mean, I'm not saying you have to set up on a scrape, but if you can set up where you can see one, 50, 60 yards away, that puts you in a way better position to get one to come closer. You throw a grunt at them, get some rattling going. I mean, if you got to put yourself where the deer are in the rut, in my opinion. Honestly, during the rut, I kind of throw away the feeding and the bedding and their routines because you should, because it's the rut. Nothing matters.
Yeah.
They're running around, they're doing whatever. So
even to some extent, well, I'll see how you feel about this. In my opinion, I think when the rut is really in full swing, you can almost kind of forego the whole wind direction thing a little bit, where it's less important to be hunting the right wind and more important to be hunting the right location. Would you kind of agree with that?
I was gonna continue on and say that. I mean, I wouldn't do it every time. Like,
right.
Say you get what's the most prominent wind in November? Northwest.
Yep.
Pretty much. I mean,
Yep.
You're not getting a lot of south. Say you got a ton of deer that are coming in this area, and you can go in there and see deer and get a chance. Oh, go ahead.
Right.
What are you gonna do? It's the rut. I mean, that deer is not scent checking. He's only gonna wind you if you really mess up and you spook him or whatever the case is. You know what I mean? Like, unless you get his attention, he's not gonna know you're there.
No. And we've got a stand, like at our water hole where my dad shot his buck. That was obviously out of the gun stand, but we've got a tree stand there as well. They're kind of coming from like the really more so west, but a little bit northwest, if anything. So I like a north wind or a northeast wind, but I get a little bit nervous sitting there on a northwest wind because if it trends a little bit more west than north, that could possibly be, kind of leading down that direction. But when the rut is in full swing, that I don't want a straight west wind, but like if it's not perfect, if it's not that perfect northeast wind, as long as it's close, I still feel pretty confident hunting there.
Right. Which you should, because like even this weekend, you weren't out, were you?
No.
They were saying like Saturday was supposed to be like 15-mile-an-hour northeast winds. So we get down there, we set up in a stand, which is good for a northeast wind. It's like calm, like 2 miles an hour, and it's just swirled the whole night. So it's like, realistically, sometimes you can't even trust it. Even Sunday night was supposed to be really windy, and it wasn't that windy. So it's like, they're calling for one wind, and you get out there and it completely switches. What do you get? Some days you can't do anything about it. So especially during the rut, I don't know. I don't worry about that too much. I tell that to my dad, like the last couple of years. I'm like, okay, screw the wind. Let's get in there.
Right. Yeah.
We got to get aggressive. We got to make something happen.
So then probably the more exciting buck sign that happens around this year is rubs, which is when they're, scraping up trees, mostly smaller to medium trees with their antlers, which is, I think, more visible than scrapes. It's easier to see and it's kind of more exciting. But I want to get your take on those because I think a lot of people would probably say that rubs are less reliable than scrapes in terms of a deer coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably agree with that. One, it's pretty hard to tell how fresh an actual scrape is. Like at least by me, they tend to scrape on I want to say it's like cedars, like little cedars.
Yep. They love those.
Yeah. And they'll do their occasional pine or small oak, but it's mostly cedars,
Yep.
and that's a softer wood. So, um, if they did that, which I have occasional ones around that, I'm like, well, that's pretty fresh. I mean, you can kind of tell, like, and they just mess around, or I don't know if it feels good that they do it or what. But if I had one in September and I have one in November, they're gonna look the same. They're not. It's not like you wait a year and it's dried up and it's not very vibrant orangey anymore. If I
Right.
have one in September and early November, it looks the exact same to me. So it's hard to tell really what how long ago that was made, or what they're gonna hit that on, or whatever.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Um, and I think like if you had this cedar that was just completely tore up, and maybe there's some saplings around it, that are also kind of tore up to where you're looking at it like, oh man, whichever buck hit this must have been pretty wide because he's hitting these saplings that are 10 inches off in each direction. He's got to be 20 inches wide or whatever. If you had the biggest scrape or biggest rub, I should say, in the woods, and you want to put a trail camera on it, there's a good chance you're probably not going to get a picture of that same buck coming back and hitting that rub again.
Right.
But almost along the same lines as the scrapes, like, let me ask you this. If there was a 10-acre chunk that was riddled with rubs and a 10-acre chunk that hardly had any on it, which one would you hunt on?
I mean, yeah, I'm still gonna hunt that 10-acre chunk that's littered with them,
Right.
but
You're going to hunt where the buck sign is, and I think that's kind of the philosophy that we share here, where people on the internet sort of poo poo the idea of hunting where rubs are at, or even to some extent scrapes or scrape lines or scrapes on a field edge or whatever. And to some extent, like, that makes sense. But I think, especially whether it's private land or public land, but especially if it's public land, like, my advice would be go find where all of that sign is and then hunt it. Like, figure out how you can get the best access. Try to play the wind as much as you can, but if it's not perfect, like, just get in there and hunt where the buck sign is, because maybe it's not going to be the same buck coming through, or maybe the same buck will be in the area but just not hitting the same trees. But like, you want to be where the sign is. Early season, there's just less of it. There's less scrapes, there's less rubs. It's harder to tell where the bucks are, but during this time of year, they make themselves very, very visible. So I think, personally, I think it's kind of stupid to not be hunting where all of the sign is.
right, and I would agree with that. Like, where I see, like, what you say is your 10 acres plot of tons of signs. I see that down in, like, our marsh, where you got um, tons of little trees that aren't very big, almost saplings, and like, that's where I see them just shredded. Like, any tree they can get on is just annihilated. And that's where I got a plan this year with my dad that we're gonna canoe in along the river and hunt right on the edge of the river, and it's just a big open marsh area, because, like, that's where those deer are. Like, I just see them in, like, a rutting, like, a good day where the rut is just full bore. Like, you will see tons of deer that are just running around down there, like, actually running.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see that a ton of, like, in hardwoods where, like, you got scrapes on every tree you look. I'm sure it's around there, but um, it's definitely in that marshy area. I know where that's where I'm gonna hone in this year at least once. I'm gonna try it with my dad, and he's kind of on board, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. And I know you said, like, you can kind of go away from the food and bedding a little bit at this time also, but I mean, when it is the actual rut, doe bedding areas are not a bad place to be, because bucks are definitely going to cruise through there to try and look for those does. And food plots also, it's not maybe the best spot to be, but certain tactics, like if you have a decoy, a lot of times bucks might, or like an open cut cornfield, bucks will pop out into a cut cornfield and, visually just scan to see if there's any does around. And if you have a doe decoy out there, that can be super effective. Like the couple of years ago when Gabby was on a buck, in her backyard that was kind of cruising around doing his thing. And I think if we would have thrown a decoy out there, he would have been on it in a heartbeat because there was other does out there that like he just popped his head out, saw them, and he was on a beeline for them. So I think when it gets to this time of year, there's almost no bad place to be in a certain sense. Like you just want to be out in the woods because they're just moving so much right now. There's going to be action, but I think there's certain tactics you can use for some of those other locations. But one thing, maybe more important than either of those spots, how do you feel about hunting over water this time of year?
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. I shouldn't have said like throw the food and bedding out, but yeah, they're gonna hit that, but for sure water. Those deer are running like crazy. They're thirsty. They gotta drink. So, I mean, if you can keep your waters full and that it's not frozen over, it's a heck of a spot to be. And like me, I like putting my waters right on my food holes, my food plots. I know it's not what some people would do, but I do it, and it's killer.
Yeah, I mean, you see on trail cameras this time of year, bucks will be cruising through mouth wide open because they're breathing heavy, they're running all over the place, they're panting pretty much. Like,
Hmm.
just they're going to have to hit water sooner or later. And if you have private land and you find these places where there's a big scrape line or there's all these rubs, there's all this buck activity. Now, if you take note of that and then in the spring you come back and you dig a water hole in there, that, you dig a water hole in, you set up a mock scrape, and then you have a tree stand that's perfect for a northwest wind that's like 25 yards away from the scrape and 25 yards away from the water hole. And it's in that area where buck activity already picks up during this time of year. Like, you're golden. There's nowhere I'd rather be.
Right, for sure. I totally agree with that. I mean, and you said it best. You just got to be out there, and I preach that. I mean, I love that. Everyone's always like, oh, it's too hot. I go out there, I shot a buck. Oh, it's too rainy. I go out there and shoot a doe. Like you just got to be out there. You never know. The cameras, yeah, they help a little bit, but they don't write the whole story. They're only taking a picture of a little chunk of land. You know.
Right. And those deer still have to live somewhere.
Right.
They don't
They're
go
not just gonna
underground
shut
when it's
down
80
completely.
degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of that. Like, I don't care what the weather is. I'm gonna hunt.
Yeah. I mean,
Unless it's 100-mile-an-hour winds where it's physically like unsafe to be out there, I'll be
right.
out there.
Yeah. It was 85 degrees when my dad shot his buck. And, where that buck was
Right.
going? He was going to a water hole because he was hot and he wanted water. Like, there's still ways you
Exactly.
can hunt them no matter what the conditions are. But when it's this time of year, you get into that pre-rut. I almost like the pre-rut better than the rut in some ways. I guess I'd like to hear your take on that too. But I feel like when it's the actual true rut, they're locked down so much on the does that they're just so hard. Like, I don't know. I feel like they're so hard to predict. They're so hard to control and maneuver. They're just like all over the place. Sometimes that helps them to slip up, but you could see a deer 50 yards away and you could try to grunt at them potentially, like depending upon the situation with does and other bucks. Like, sometimes the pre-rut or the rut is so intense that it almost leads to somewhat of a disadvantage, where the pre-rut I feel like is that perfect sweet spot where they're super amped up and much more likely to make a mistake, but they're also not completely distracted yet where they almost start to go the other direction. I feel like the pre-rut, like you said, 2, 3, 4 days from now until like Halloween is like perfect, I think.
I mean, yeah, I would agree. Um, we're young. We haven't really been able to experience tons of different scenarios. And with us being in high school, it's not like we could go out and hunt during the week. We only hunted weekends, and that was, you know, hit or miss.
Right.
Where now we kind of have the luxury of going whenever we can if we want, type of thing. So, I'd still think I think I haven't experienced enough rut or pre-rut yet to really determine, but I would agree with that. That the pre-rut could be, I mean, that's killer. Like, you can get one that's slipping up. He doesn't know what's going on. I mean, he's not locked down on a doe. He's just kind of cruising. You get out there before you start putting a ton of pressure on him. I know, because for us during the rut, we'll be up there, 7 days straight of three guys going out. Like, there's bound to determine you're gonna get sent up there, you're gonna spook deer. Yeah, it's the rut. They might just kind of forget about it, but eventually they're gonna get smart eventually.
Right.
So if you can get in there and kill them, I think it's a great time.
And I feel like that pre-rut is when the does aren't ready yet, but the bucks are. And then when the rut happens, the does are also ready. And I feel like you guys have experienced it just about as bad as anybody, that sometimes those does, especially if there's too many of them, that doesn't really give you much of a rut.
Right, and that was my next point of saying, like, the rut for us has sucked the last few years just because we have way too many does, and they don't have to work hard at all to find a doe. So
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, I grunted that one in last year, and other than that, that was about it for shooter bucks that we could have shot. I think, it's just how it goes, and we're still trying to figure, because it's always, when do we take off? When should we take off? There's never really a great answer, because it could happen. The full rut could be on from a week from now, but it could be 3 weeks from now. You never know.
Right. You don't know until it's like happening. It's very short notice.
Pretty much, yeah.
So how much do you do, like any rattling sequences or grunting or
Oh,
whatever?
I've been getting way more aggressive lately. I like taking my rattling horns and tying them to my bow rope and dropping them down out of the tree,
Yep.
and then, like, bouncing them off the ground and rattling, so it actually sounds more realistic.
Yep.
Um, I've been doing more grunting in certain situations too, and that's how I got that one to come in last year. So I think it definitely helps. I love being aggressive. You know me. I like pushing the limits, doing a lot of things that people say you shouldn't do. But I
Yeah, I
think the
mean,
more noise, the better, to be honest.
yeah, Colby rattled in that buck last year blindly that
Right.
he shot with a bow during this time of year. I don't remember specifically which day it was, but I would say
I
it
think it
was
was like
within the next
30th
week.
or 31st,
It could have been. Yeah, it could have been.
or
It's
29th maybe. I don't know. One of
Yeah,
those
it
three
was
days.
somewhere in there, like this end of October time when it was
Right.
probably still pre-rut, maybe getting into rut, but yeah, that's I know he would say this for sure that real antlers are the way to go. Would you kind of echo
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I it's kind of weird. I hate taking my sheds out. I hate using them for rattling horns, but
Yeah,
it definitely sounds better than, the buck rack or whatever the hell they're called.
right. Yeah, I think they can probably tell. Probably. I mean, people have obviously rattled them in with things that are not real antlers. Like that's happened thousands of times before. But if you can, I would say real antlers are probably the best way to go. But yeah,
Yeah,
like
they just got a better crack to them when you hit them.
yeah, yeah. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, like just the commotion, a little like they're curious this time of year. So I feel like noise and rustling leaves and those antlers knocking together. Like I think now more than ever at any point throughout the season, some of those things might that maybe would scare them away in September actually would bring them over your direction in late October, early November because they're like,
Oh, for
oh, is
sure.
that another buck?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of the rut. They're basically fighting to see who's the better man, type of thing. So
Yeah. I mean, Ben and I walked into the stand together last year, either late October or early November, and we got charged by a buck.
yeah,
Because, yeah, like up to within 10 yards easy as we were walking in, he just ran like right at us and then got close enough to where we must have made some sort of noise at him and he peeled off. But like we got charged because we're just walking along and he was so curious. He's like, I'm going to go figure out what this is.
I mean, that's our whole point of why we don't walk in till daybreak.
Right, because they get
We've had
curious and they'll follow you.
Yeah, and that way you're ready to go. You can knock an arrow and shoot one if you need
Yep.
to, and it's just easier. I mean, you can see them then too. I mean,
Right.
who's saying you can't shoot them from the ground then? It's
Yep.
just that's just what we've. That's all I know really.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be pushing it now this year of not getting in there a half hour before daylight. I can tell you that. I'm going to be pushing it right at that daybreak time.
Right.
So before we got going here, you said you had something to share, but you were going to wait. Did we cover that already or
That was more so about the scrapes. Saying how they were hot like 2 weeks ago and now they're just
oh,
dead.
sure.
But
I mean,
I don't know.
it is one of those social things. Like we put those mock scrapes up and they hit them year round. Does, fawns, bucks, they
hmm
hit them year round. So it is sort of a social aspect, but that is a
I
little
mean,
bit
even
weird.
even man-made one or even deer-made ones that they were making along fields, they're kind of. But I think they were just hitting them early. And another big thing is we have so much food by us. They took the beans off already. There's beans all over the field. The acorns are just in abundance still. I mean, there's just so much food that like the deer don't have to go anywhere. They don't
No.
have to move. They don't have to work at all.
So that was
So
going to be
that's
my
why.
question though. Were you seeing all these scrapes when the beans were still up and now they're down and the scrapes have subsided there? Were the scrapes like
Oh
mostly along field
yeah,
edges?
right. Yeah, I would say that they were. I mean, they were along field edges where there was a bunch of acorn trees and beans. So I don't really know how much that plays into it, but that's definitely more where they were. And now that it's off, our cameras have been a little slow. There's like last week, I'd say they're the slowest they've been all year, but now they're starting to pick back up again, and the weather's helping. I mean, I'm getting pictures of 6, 7 does in one camera laying down, bedded down right by the
Yep.
water. So I mean, no, they're starting to move again. We had a couple bucks moving last night early. We had a foggy morning. That was a little frosty, so they were definitely up and moving this morning. So I think it's just, I'm not a firm believer in the October low, but I think it's definitely a thing where they kind of, shut down for a little bit before it really just ramps up.
Yeah, and I think maybe more than anything, it's a shift too, because that is one of the main criticisms of hunting over scrapes or not maybe paying a ton of attention to those scrapes is scrapes that are along a field edge. A lot of times people will say those don't really mean much, and I could see that being the case, for you guys where a lot of your access is along a field edge. So you're going to see like every single one of those, and they might hit them where there's a bunch of acorns. So they're out there all night long, or they're in the beans all night long, and then they hit those like going to and from the field, at dark. But I wonder now if most of your scrapes are just transitioning, deeper into the woods. They're more in the bedding areas and wherever else. And, maybe they're just not hitting those in the field as much because they're not out there as much now that the beans are down.
Right, for sure. I mean, that's a great way to look at it. It's just, I don't know. There's so many different things that can make or break. So,
Yeah, I think the one thing that, you could get out of this episode is that the sign is going to be out there. Bucks are going to be putting their sign down. And I think the best thing you can do is just go find where it is and hunt it.
yeah, I would agree. I'd say even just hunting in general,
Right?
just
Yeah, just get out there. You can't kill them from the couch. You love to say that. You love it so much. We made a shirt that says that, and
right.
it's true, man.
And I can preach it. I hunt almost every weekend I can. So,
Yeah, not too many weekends off this time of year.
and I've been fairly successful with it. So,
Yeah, and it's like we said, like it's just doing the right things and hunting in the right areas at the right time. You're not blowing out your best stands in September. You're probably hunting more along those field edges and whatever, but there's a way that you can hunt without ruining things basically the whole year.
yeah,
Like you can ruin things really, really fast if you're not hunting the way that you should be, but if you really pay attention to certain techniques and you play the wind and you understand where you should be hunting early season versus like this time of year, you can hunt pretty much every weekend and not really blow things out too bad.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree.
Well, I know you're tagged out on your buck now. It sounds like Terry is still open for business, although probably not this weekend. But there's still a couple tags to be filled with the Buck Fever crew. So hopefully we can put something on the ground over the next couple weekends, and then it's going to be Minnesota trip pretty quick.
Yep, I'm pretty excited. Hopefully we can knock down a few more before the trip. I mean, that'd be awesome. And even if not, we still got plenty of time when we get back to Wisconsin. So
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to being out this weekend. Hopefully things are going to ramp up, and this is going to be some of the most exciting hunting weekends of the entire year. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I think anybody who still has a tag to fill should get out in the woods, find the buck sign, get out there, and just hunt, because this is definitely the best time to be doing that. So, yeah, like we said, we've had a lot of success so far this year. We've got 3 new videos out since the season opened of bucks getting shot, whether it was Jake's buck, my dad's buck, Ty's buck from the youth hunt, and then a couple does also in that video. So the content's out there. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. And we're going to have Jake's doe coming out at some point, and hopefully more bucks on the way. So lots of content out for you guys, and we appreciate each of you who takes the time to watch it, to listen to it. And so if you're listening now, thank you. We really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, maybe leave us a comment, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That's the number one thing that helps us out. And like we said, we can't thank you enough. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.